Okay, welcome back to the last part of this workshop. It's always difficult, isn't it, to be the last? But I think this session brought together a lot of the things that we have been discussing over the last 2 days. And I think I'm assuming that we will have lots of questions, either from participants online or in the room. And if not, there are quite some other questions. I was, for example, also discussing in the break, because that's, of course, my area of expertise where I feel most confident and comfortable, is the risk management plan for these kind of products. What kind of issues would you expect to be part of it? And I think I heard long-term safety several times. And that's, well, actually almost default for us. There are not that many products who have, at the time of the licensing, long-term safety available. So in a risk management plan, that's always one of the things that is highlighted, either most of the time as missing information and with ways to address it. I don't know, I think I found the surroundings or the environments much more challenging to ensure, like the setting, the preparation of the patient, possibility of suicidality. That's always a very difficult topic to mitigate. And also the need for the support afterwards, whether it's peer support or healthcare professional guided support. Those are things that are really important from what I've heard, but it's very difficult to regulate. We have, of course, the possibility of controlled access. We use that, but most of the time that's due to illegal use or abuse or risk of that. But it could also be that you want to have only in centers that are specialized, for example. So that's just to set the scene a little bit. But I'm really happy if there are any questions in the room or online. So if...
Already.
Oh, already, yes. So now, because I don't know anybody of you yet, so I'll just hand over to you with the red cord. Yes, please. Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Hi, I'm George McBride. I'm a co-founder of Clerkenwell Health. We're a psychedelic specialty contract research organisation and site network in the UK. So we work with a number of psychedelic sponsors to design studies, engage with regulators, and then manage and deliver their commercial research for them. I've been very grateful to the diverse stakeholders for their input, but my question is more for the regulator, and just to hear whether there is plans afoot about changes that can be made or that are being considered that will make the EMA jurisdiction more competitive for winning commercial psychedelic research studies. We're considering an investment, significant investment into the EU to build out centres for the conduct of this research, and just want to know how you expect things might change and whether you see problems with the how competitive the EMA is versus other jurisdictions like the FDA, the TGA, Health Canada, and the MHRA and others.
A very interesting question. I'm looking at my colleagues at EMA, whether you can provide some reflections on that, or maybe...
I can start, but then I'll also look around for support. It's not about competitiveness here. It's about providing the right environment as much as we can to actually assist that research happens in a way that it provides proper data. I mean, I'm not sure how much you're aware about a mandate, but we do not have the same, we're not positioned the same as other jurisdictions, as the FDA, for example, or the Therapeutic Goods Administration, because the regulatory system and the regulatory framework in Europe is not EMA only. A significant part of it is national authorities, but also other partners like the MCDDA. We have different aspects that are covered by different structure. So my reaction first would be, yes, we can be part of a collaborative effort if we need to establish standards of care, for example, standards of data gathering, etc. But we do not mandate ourselves all aspects of this, and quite a lot of this has to be dependent on national regulation, law, etc., for which, of course, we can also provide a collaborative platform to discuss with all partners. But definitely this is not about competition of who does it first, because we know that research will have to happen here in Europe as well with the specifics of the European population. And for what is necessary, the EMA will always be ready to collaborate. So I can only state that from our perspective. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that further clarification. I can see that there is a hand raised in WebEx. So Eva, over to you, please.
Thank you very much. So I think that probably your question was somehow driven by my presentation. I maybe presented quite strict criteria for the approval. However, this is mainly related to the fact that our aim is to bring to the market a safe and efficacious product. And if we want to treat psychedelics as medicinal products, they have to fulfill requirements as for other medicinal products. So probably your question was more related to these very strict criteria. However, I would like to assure you that as in any other areas, we have a strong cooperation with other jurisdictions. So we have a lot of dialogue. So I would not really perceive EMA requirements as especially strict or diverging from the other jurisdictions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva, for that further reflections. Thank you. And then we had a question or remark on the right side. Amir, I was informed.
Yeah, sorry, me again. Psychedelic research obviously has been in the dark ages for quite a long time. And I think we have to be careful that we do not create more barriers now with what we are proposing and what we agree on. So with that in mind, I actually had two questions. We talked about set and setting, and we've kind of more or less assumed that this is what it is and this is what is needed. And I'd like to ask the question in terms of the evidence base that is there to support that the set and setting is of the importance that it is claimed to be. Is there published data? Is there published research on set and setting and its role in the therapeutic process? And the other question I had was, I've heard suicidality heard a few times. And again, suicidality, especially with clinical trials in depression, it's a feature of the disease. It's seen not only as part of the disease, but also with SSRIs and other antidepressants. And in the absence of evidence that indicates that with psychedelics, the risk is higher, why are we specifically concerned about this? I know it's quite important, and we have to make sure it doesn't happen in our research, but are we at a risk of scaring off investigators from doing research in this area by focusing on something that hasn't conclusively been demonstrated in studies?
Thank you so much for those reflections. Very, very helpful. I have another question from Erik Vermetten. If you could introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Erik Vermetten. I'm a professor of psychiatry at Leiden University Medical Center. I'd like to bring to the attention of us here today what's been called over lunch the elephant in the room. We have two FDA-approved drugs for the treatment of PTSD, sertraline and paroxetine. And somewhere by August or so, we'll have another candidate to be approved, which is MDMA, assisted therapy. Now, there's no mutual recognition for MDMA to Europe. So in a certain way, we're in Europe at a state of what to do next. And there's a big appetite because people read the newspapers and patients read newspapers and articles, and there's a need to jump on the bandwagon. But where are we? And what trials should we do? Should we do another phase 3 trial? I know that Lykos, or formerly MAPS PBC, sort of shied away, and they said we wanted to allocate our resources to the registration in the US, and that's fair, but there's no attention for Europe. Now, I was the PI of an open label phase 2 trial for Formapps. And we were doing that with seven countries that were lining up for a phase 3 trial that never happened. So I would like to ask the panel or the experts here in the room, like, should we now do compassionate use? Should we have a special access program? Should every country now decide on their own what is the best in their best interest? Or should we, as to cite David Nutt's, like real world data? Can we a one big trial, a European trial or so, and every year reports back to the EMA or so? Would that qualify at all? I mean, these are some creative solutions that we could think of, but what we do not want to see is when there is the registered drug in the US and there's this appetite that there will be an explosion in the underground world, that people will start experimenting with this. I think that would not be in the interest of the patient population, not for our credibility. And that is already happening as we speak. So there is a kind of an urgency at the same time. So I'd like to bring this to the panel and sort of reflections on guide us to where we should put our energy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very good question. And not an easy one, of course. That's always the issue with good questions. And I don't know exactly who I could hand over to what would be a good way forward. I'm thinking that collaboration on the academic level might be a good start, because we as regulators are most of the time on the receiving end of the data. So before we can do something, we need a dossier, isn't it? And Eva highlighted that. It's been highlighted by Marion and by Andre. So I'm not sure where we all could start, but I think it's not at the level of you're expecting the regulators to do something, I think. Is that correct?
Well, to give us guidance, probably, because we want to adhere to the standards that are needed to obtain probably the regulation or the registration by the EMA. So what is the best way forward? Another phase 3 trial, we know that it costs about 30 million to go there, right? So who will bring up the money? Is that what organization, what philanthropy, or it's probably not philanthropy, but could you give us some and maybe the answer is not ready tomorrow, but we need to get our solidarity, to phrase my neighbor on my left side, together in solving this, because what we fear is some pressure that could firing back against us.
Thank you so much. So one of the things that is popping up is the value of the real world data, I think. Maybe Pavel, you would like to come in, and after that, maybe Andre?
Yes, I would also defer to the colleagues of the CNS Working Party, and specifically in the area of neuroscience, if we start discussing this. But like any other discussion, first we have to have the context of what type of data we provided and for what purpose. And this can be agreed with the regulators, indeed. And second, it's not only the vehicle in which these data are generated. We should not focus so much on labeling whether data are coming from a phase 3 trial or from a registry or from any other vehicle, provided that the methodological concerns that are specific for the intended context of use are covered. So if it's well done, if the data are collected in a manner that is as per the specific methodological requirements, yes, we can consider them. And again, we have to turn back to the context for what these data are good for and what they're not good for. It is a very convoluted answer, but it's impossible to say, yes, you must do a phase 3 trial, because a phase 3 trial might also not answer the questions if it's methodologically not appropriate. And we cannot say you cannot use real world data, because the context is key and leading to that. And maybe if we don't talk specifically about psychedelics, we can refer to Dr. Haberkamp and Dr. Elfering. These are not uncommon questions for other conditions, and we have issued such guidance. So can we make any parallels? Dr. Elfering, first, your thought about real-world data in this context?
Well, I think basically we are assessing claims, and claims are that the product is effective and safe to be on the market. So that requires a clinical development plan, preferably a phase dose finding, a phase 2 and a phase 3. That's one thing. If you talk about, and yeah, there are special claims. You have claims depression, treatment-resistant depression, as monotherapy. We've seen that kinds of trials, or in an add-on context, and as a single dose therapy or a chronic dose therapy. So there are all kinds of granulations, which determines the claim, which in the end will be reflected in the indication. If we talk about real-world data, I see there an opportunity for adverse events, but it depends on the quality, I would say, on the real-world data. Are they sampled in a standardized, structured way, with the right comparatives, that sort of things? That's real-world data does not mean just post-marketing case series. That's also requires also a study protocol and study objectives and what you want to know. If you want to know the suicidal ideation or the risk of suicidality, you might need a somewhat larger population and a larger and longer follow-up, even if that's real-world data. I see a role in real-world data if you talk about expansion of the indication. Once you have proven the efficacy, let's say in adults, maybe it may not be necessary to do a separate clinical trial in adolescents, but you can do some kind of extrapolation exercise where real-world data may facilitate. For instance, if you have an adolescent and you look at the pre-treatment and post-treatment score, and that is similar to that of seen in adult subjects, then there's not much to say that it doesn't work in adolescents. So there I see a role for real-world data. I see a role for real-world data if you want to expand the indication to special populations within the broad indication. You should not have for each subpopulation whatever randomized controlled trials. That is too expensive, I would say. There I see a role for real-world data, but I'm somewhat worried about real-world data because it's a broad concept, but if you specify it, there's a lot of diversity in quality, etc., and thus in the reliability of the data. So they need a protocol, and they need a kind of careful assessment and follow up. Documented, etc. So it of course it reduces the burden and it increases the efficiency. But it's not, let's sample some data. I stop here.
Thank you so much, André. And indeed, at EMA, there's a lot of activity around real-world data and real-world evidence. And they're developing standards, and there are available information already now on that. So that could be followed. I don't know, Marion, if you would like to come in?
Yes, I mean, going back to the original question, what are the next steps and what should be done? I mean, as you said, for regulators to approve any kind of drug, we need a dossier to assess. So, and therefore, for this dossier, we need quality, we need preclinical data, we need the clinical data. So, and to the clinical dossier, we need of course, phase 3 studies, and there are phase 3 studies ongoing. And as soon as the results are there, please come to EMA and submit them, and we have a look at that. And we will assess that, and that might be sufficient for approval. And there might be not only one single type of study which we need, so we might need 2 or 3 types of studies, like one study that addresses the dose finding, and one study that assesses comparison to a comparator or a placebo, and then one study to characterize the maintenance of effects. And these studies we know are ongoing. So as soon as the results are available, we will of course assess them. And you say, well, US, there is already a drug application submitted, as we learned from the press. They didn't come to EMA, but they could. I mean, so why? And we will have a look at that, and so that is something we would assess, and then we will see what comes out, what is the benefit risk, and how to assess that, as in any other jurisdiction. And I think also the laws and the schedules are not an obstacle. I didn't put that in my presentation last time, but I presented it at ECMP last year. I mean, studies can be done, and while learning and doing that, the results will then inform that the schedules can be adapted. So this is something which can be done and which everybody is now aware of, and that is something which would come out of the results, and that is something I think that can be achieved. And I don't see so much that there's a regulatory obstacle for these kind of things. We are encouraging this, and come to us with the data. And of course, it needs to be developed as any other drug as well. We need the dossier.
Thank you. There are quite some colleagues who would like to comment on this. Maria, I hand over to you. And Eva, I know you've been waiting patiently. You will be the next one on this question.
Okay, so I wanted to address the earlier question regarding the evidence for the setting component. And I would like to do it by turning the question around and ask about the evidence for it not having an effect. So in regard to the overview that I did before on the setting, I would say that the sign of the studies so far, we can't answer that question. So we need to do proper design studies to answer that question. But in regards to the overview that I showed before on the setting in clinical psilocybin trial, all of those have used highly trained healthcare personnel, psychotherapists, psychologists, and psychiatrists who spend around 15 to 20 hours or more together with the patients. And assuming that that was not psychotherapy in there, that's for me to draw the wrong conclusion. Yeah. I think you also wanted to say something regarding this, Robert.
Yeah, thank you. So it's in addition. So the evidence is low. Qualitative research can inform us, and there's also common sense. So, but how should we weigh that, and how much is needed? And then, of course, a major question, which is in line with what my neighbor is saying: who's going to fund the trial that does psilocybin treatment with 3 hours, as you were saying yesterday, versus 12 hours of support or psychotherapy, or however we name it? If you really want to know it, you should do something decent. And one of the problems in these kind of studies is that the more time you put into this treatment, the more likely you'll get a better reaction. That's in any kind of psychotherapy trial. So you will run into methodological issues whichever way you go. Would it be possible to develop a standard based on a combination of what we know and what we think is realistic and humane? And would that be something to work with? Or should we formulate an agenda that says, this is the number one knowledge question regarding the number of sessions, etc., and then try to find a way to do that study? And the other thing, suicidality, if I may. I fully agree that if we treat patients with severe mental illness, we are going to see people with increased suicidality or even suicide. It's not realistic to sort of keep that out of our project. So we should evaluate that in a nuanced way, and we should be mindful of the fact that suicide is one of the major causes of death in younger adults and other age categories as well, and that most of them have a mental condition. So I think we shouldn't be too... you can understand that industry and everybody is very mindful and cautious with it, but it's not realistic with mental disorder to rule it out.
Thank you so much for those helpful reflections. Eva, you are online. Would you like to come in on this specifically?
Yes, thank you very much. So I would like to address these 3 questions that have been asked. So first question was regarding indeed suicidality. So suicidality is always considered a serious adverse event, and this is why it should always be addressed specifically in the clinical trial. And it is really regardless of a target population. I absolutely acknowledge, I'm also a psychiatrist, I absolutely acknowledge that for this specific population of patients we are talking here, and for this specific indication, suicidality is sometimes difficult to be disentangled between the safety issue and the lack of efficacy issue. However, this, as being a serious adverse event, must be appropriately, adequately addressed in the clinical trial, and must be well discussed. And now, with respect to the real world evidence, yeah, I absolutely agree with Andrea and Marion. Currently, we are providing here quite general comments. To be more specific, we really need to see the dossier. So the previous speaker asked about what would be the next step. So I think that once the dossier is quite advanced in the development, you can also seek a scientific advice. So within the remit of the scientific advice, we do not assess the results of the studies. However, we assess the acceptability of the whole dossier. It may be one of the questions asked to the scientific advice. So, and with respect to the assessment by the FDA and EMA, these are 2 independent assessments. So this is why scientific advice at EMA, I think it's a good solution and good step forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eva. And then I had Professor Goodwin, who would like to come in on this.
Thanks very much. If we could just go back to the issues around nomenclature and psychological support, which Maria rightly raised as an area of certain confusion. I think one of the issues is that I think it is unhelpful to describe the treatment as a psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. And I think that makes for confusion all round when it's so clearly, if anything, the other way round, that the psychological support helps the psychedelic. Things have moved on from the time when we did designed our phase 2 study. And so a lot of thought has been given to what it is that the psychological support or basic support should be comprised of. I think psychological support is not a bad word. I don't think it is a taken word. That's not the way language works, really. I think we're using it quite a lot and it's quite useful. And essentially, the challenge is to have a uniform way of preparing patients for the experience of the psychedelic drug. To do that in a conducive environment, which is completely standardized across a clinical study. And bear in mind, we're talking about clinical trials here. And that is what you can achieve with a suitable contract with IKEA. You can get the same setting for all of the treatment sessions. Having prepared the patients in a completely uniform way, they are randomized to receive different doses of drug or placebo. And essentially, the challenge is to ensure that therapists behave comparably under those 3 conditions, and in addition, during the integration sessions, which we see as largely about safety and asking about difficult experiences that people may have had. Now, how do we ensure that things happen in the way that we want them to? That is now increasingly possible because of advances in basically in the technology, whereby we can do pretty much simultaneous translation and text creation. And additionally, one can add to that now various ways of analyzing that text using artificial intelligence. So there is this is an area which is going to develop very quickly in the next few years. And I think the idea that that we're sort of stuck back in where we were 6 years ago is really misleading. There's going to be a lot of evidence that we will be able to show to regulators that ensure their confidence that what we do is uniform across different treatment arms, and that in particular therapists adhere to the training that they've been provided with. And that wasn't really possible in the past, but it will be in the future. Thank you.
Maria, you would like to come in?
Yeah, could I? Yeah, thank you. I think we have a quite good word for it already, set and setting, that includes both the if you want to call it psychological support or psychotherapy, or but also the customized environment for it. But I don't know. I would also say that wording is important, but I think even more important is the measuring of the components. And I don't think that we need AI in order to do that. You can do it already. Yes, I would say if you can measure the activities in the brain, you can also measure the behaviors in the room by just recording it and check it for adherence. You could also check the relational variables by manual coding of those therapy sessions or the support sessions.
Thank you so much. And I try to balance a little bit also the people online. So I have online a question or remark from Christina Grisa from the European Commission. So please, over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and congrats for having organized this very important and interesting workshop. So my name is Christine Grisa. I work at the European Commission, the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, Unit on Health Innovations and Ecosystems. I'm part of the team supporting the work of the Innovative Health Initiative and also have other responsibilities for the health cluster. But I would like to comment on the point of research funding, which was implicitly touched upon in some of the questions. Now, there is, of course, the main Horizon Europe work program, and congrats to Professor Schervers on presenting the very interesting details of the SciPal project today. I would also like to point out that there could be further opportunities to support such research in Horizon Europe, for instance, under Cluster 1 Health, for which the core topics are broadly defined. So keep an eye out for future work programs. But I would also like to mention another funding instrument, which is the Innovative Health Initiative, IHI. So a little bit of context here. The European Commission is one of the IHI founding members. IHI is a public-private partnership between the EU and several health industry sectors. So pharmaceuticals, vaccines, medical technologies, imaging, diagnostics, biotech, and companies active in the digital area. The overall aim of IHI is to deliver safe, effective health innovations that cover the entire spectrum of care, from prevention to diagnosis and treatment, particularly in areas of unmet public health need. And now this partnership has a total budget of 2.4 billion euros over 7 years, of which 1.2 billion euros is from the EU via Horizon Europe, and the rest is brought in by private partners, mostly as in-kind contributions. These contributions from private partners are, of course, crucial for any topic idea under IHI. So in principle, psychedelic research is within the scope of IHI as long as relevant research is pre-competitive and cross-sectoral in nature and fits in IHI, in the research and innovation agenda of IHI. So while I cannot provide any further information on the content of upcoming calls today, I'd like to point out that when available to the public, all future draft topics are released on the IHI website. And as the last point, I'd also like to point out that on the IHI website, there's the so-called Ideas Incubator, which provides an opportunity for a mechanism to provide ideas for potential new IHI topics, following the concept of co-creation. And that means that suggestions from the wider health and research community are indeed welcome. And this incubator has been set up to make it easier for people to submit ideas and for IHI to assess them. Thank you.
Thank you so much for addressing this so extensively. It's a question that has come up several times, and funding is crucial, I think. So it's keep an eye out for IHI. Lots of opportunities, not the easiest one, but and also I think very helpful to know about the incubator. So thank you so much for your intervention. I have so many people who would like to come in. I have Maya Kohek already waiting for a long time, and then Philippe.
Thank you. So I would have another comment or a reflection regarding the hierarchy of evidence. And I would like to point out that observational studies done in a naturalistic setting can bring a perspective that gives us a bit more in-depth information in what is happening when people are taking psychedelic substances. For example, if I just take one example again, with ibogaine, we see clearly that the pharmacological activity is that it reduces the withdrawal symptoms in people, but that doesn't mean that all of the people who take ibogaine will also just stop using or that their substance use disorder will just disappear after taking the ibogaine. It will help them, but then there is many other parameters that have to be taken into account that will sustain these effects, basically. And here I would like to maybe expand this notion of set and setting, not only to the person and the direct environment in which it is taken, but also the broader environment in which this person then returns to. No? So socio-demographic and economic setting, set and setting is also very important in how these people will continue to maintain their well-being and health. So from these observational studies, we can get this kind of information. And I think it's also relevant when we are talking about mental health and what is it causing it, no? Because we can't just boil it down to biological imbalance. It is a much broader issue. And then I will just quickly also point out or maybe reflect on another thing that I think it's important. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but most clinical trials done with psychedelics are done in the global north, are done with white participants. And I think we would need to keep in mind a bit greater diversity of people included in clinical trials and in studies in general. Plus then another level, which is the gender perspective. There is very little studies with this focus in mind, and I think it's a really important one to understand how women are responding to these treatments versus men and other people in between, let's say. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting the relevance of observational studies. That's, of course, close to my heart, being from pharmacovigilance, and also the contextualization of the situation and also the need for diversity. Philippe Gorwood, you would like to come in, please. And I have a list of people who would like to come in, so no worries.
Yeah, very quickly, three points about the risk of suicidality associated with the psychedelics. The first thing is that history is also giving lessons for that. With the black box between 25 for SSRIs, when the decision was mentioned that we really should be careful because of this increase of suicidality, for the next 3 years in the American states where it was assessed, we had an increase of suicidality after the black box. So, may push a little bit, but as you treat the major reason of why you do have suicidal ideas, usually altogether it gets better. Second data, which is important for me, is we have exactly the same kinetic of increase of suicidality when you begin cognitive behavioral therapy for major depressive disorder. It's because you act initially and you need a little bit of time in order to get better. So this volatility is usually seen easier in the easier first part of the process. And the very last one, we did a study with Philippe Courtet, which was published in your ENPP, where we found that when you look at these new suicidal ideas for patients treated by an SSRI with MDD, these patients are having an increase of suicidality for the first 3 weeks. And this increase is completely attributable to insufficient efficacy on depressive disorder. So, we probably are going to get some signals exactly as with psychedelics, with SSRIs, SNRIs, and so on, because whatever we do observe it. So I think we should be very careful when we mention this idea that it might create suicidality. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those reflections, extremely helpful. I think another Philippe has been waiting very patiently. Philippe Obi, please, over to you.
Yes, thank you very much. My name is Philippe Obi. I'm a child and adolescent psychiatrist, and I'm associated with COPTECH in Nice, south of France. And of course, with my presentation, you may understand where I'm going. I was attending last year the American Academy of Child and Adolescent Psychiatry in New York, and there were 2 sessions, 2 symposia on psychedelics in children and adolescents. One where it was reported that there was an agreed pediatric study plan for MDMA-assisted therapy in PTSD. And then there was a second research symposium, in fact, where the FDA, Tiffany Fortune, presented the work of the FDA. So my really question pertains, and is following also the discussion around adolescents earlier today, is what is the European perspective on the pediatric opportunities and risks for psychedelics?
Thank you very much for that question. I would like to hand over to Dr. Andrea Elfring on this one.
I didn't hear the question. I can. My hearing aid says.
No, I can summarize it very quickly. What is the pediatric angle, in fact, for the European pediatric angle for psychedelics? Sorry.
Well, if children, adolescents comply with the diagnosis of depression or any other condition, then I would say that the difference in the disease is not different from that of adults. Only maybe the expression or maybe the clinical outcomes you measure are somewhat different. But if you can show that the children have the same, let's say, how to put it? If you can build, for instance, a PK/PD model based on adults, and you can predict the relationship between exposure and the effect in adults, and then you do, let's say, an open study in children, and you predict the expected effect, and you observe the difference between, let's say, pre-treatment and post-treatment effect in children, and that observation falls within the limits of the prediction, then personally I would accept that. I think it's still a discussion, but there's a split opinion within the regulators. But I could accept that actually. It's the same as what I said about real world data. You have a backbone of a phase 3 trial where the efficacy has been definitely and safety have been definitely be proven. And then you need additional evidence in children, but not by definition a phase 3 trial, but something like the lines just reflected upon. For safety, I think that's different. For safety, it also depends if it's a single doses or is it a chronic doses or repeated doses. For safety, I think we would like to see long-term data because the children are growing and are developing. So I'm not sure what that does. But that can be done, in my opinion, in observational studies. I see no principal objections to use these products in children as well, if they are in need for that. I think that would be my answer.
Thank you. Just to clarify the absolute necessity, of course, pediatric investigational plan has to be agreed, like with anything else, and these will contain enough detail, but we should not assume that it's a well-known. So the pediatric investigation plan will be specific, and it will give you concrete, agreed way forward on what to do, depending on the context as well and what is expected. I think Dr. Elfring went further to explain that maybe you do not need to develop a specific development program in children and what you can use from the adult and how much extrapolation we are ready to discuss. So that should be taken on the basis of an agreed PIP.
Thank you so much for that further clarification. I'm very aware of people waiting very patiently. The next on my list is George Goldsmith. Please, over to you.
Thank you. I really appreciate this discussion we've been having for the last day and a half. I think it's timely. I think that we have an understanding now of more of the urgency and the nature or scope of the challenges confronting us. And I think it's really important that we look at now, how do we start addressing these? And I think we're confronting together a unique opportunity. Rarely do we have the opportunity to look at how do we steward the introduction of a new class of medical treatments. And when you look around the room and you see the people who are developing these, I think that this is an incredibly important opportunity to look at how do we do this? How do we think about the design of trials? But to your point, as you were introducing this, I think how do we look at longitudinal data? How do we actually responsibly develop this, knowing that the trials will never remove all uncertainty? And I would strongly advocate that the best way to predict the future is to create it. And I think that we have an opportunity together to actually look at blurring the distinction between clinical research and clinical practice by collecting data. I think that we have technologies now that are available, and certainly in the COMPASS trials, every single session has been recorded, put through machine learning. We can connect that to outcomes. And I think when we start looking at this model of how do we go from the training of therapists to the outcomes they produce with a single golden thread of data and evidence, that this is really going to be the future of care. And we have to recall or remember that right now we are actually developing models of care that will be delivered 4 or 5 years from now, and the world will look different than it does today. And I think it really is something that we really need to look at in terms of how do we create this always-on evidence model, evidence generation model, and how do we get an alignment across the players developing this to work with regulators on what those data should comprise and how we actually can give patients the confidence that we know what we're doing and it's evolving based on evidence, not on folklore. And I look forward to contributing to further efforts to that effect.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for those reflections. Thaddeus, you have been waiting also patiently.
Thank you. I want to first start by thanking Christina from DG Research for providing the contribution regarding EU funding opportunities. We have been trying to target the Innovative Health Initiative, but we really appreciate the support from DG Research, but we have challenges in terms of involving industry because these projects need to involve groups like FPA and companies are still not necessarily that eager to join the kind of psychedelic science. I think there could be some other great opportunities in terms of other Horizon program and as part of kind of speaking to what George just mentioned in terms of how we can translate these discussions into something concrete. Parea will be keen to engage with, with the scientists, with patients, but also with EMA and national competent authorities to look whether we can create a consortium that could apply for funding in Horizon Europe. A good opportunity for this can be also an upcoming European Brain Health Partnership, which will be launched in 1 year and will be lasting for many years. At the moment, the Strategic Research Innovation Agenda is being created, so we need to be present in these discussions and clearly signal a need to do something in this area. So yeah, this is one of the, from our point of view, concrete outcomes that we will be very kind of dedicated to bringing to a fruition. I also want to speak very briefly to the discussions about clinical trials recognition. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what I might have heard is that EMA or national authorities could, consider trials happening outside of Europe. What we see now for instance, with the MDMA-assisted therapy for PTSD in the US. So I was wondering about some details because, there are maybe some rules like 30% of sites happening in Europe or having, more than half of the Caucasian population or kind of data that are relevant to Europe. So I was wondering what could be possible here, also in view of the fact that we will have likely the first psychedelic therapy approved in the US this year. Australia is moving forward. Canada has some form of access. Let's see what happens with UK. But there will be an increasing pressure in Europe to, from people affected by mental health conditions, substance use disorders, and so on, to have an access, seeing that other jurisdictions start providing this. So, yeah, I was just wondering what's needed. And of course, as you say, you need developers to come and engage, but what would be the bar? How about approval is one thing, but what about reimbursement and this type of discussions, how difficult it will be for companies or not? Thank you.
Thank you so much for also bringing that into the equation. We had a very interesting session yesterday on that, but of course, reimbursement is also a challenging topic. So thank you so much for that. We still have a bit of time and still have quite some people who would like to come in. The next one on my list is Hella Kasik. Please introduce yourself.
I am Helle Koosik from Estonian Association for Psychedelic Science. I am an ayahuasca researcher and also a research participant. And I give a good example of participation in an ayahuasca study in Maastricht University. It was a study in healthy volunteers, namely experienced Santo Daime members. The key points are we decided the dose we took, and an experienced member of the community was present during the session for support. We did psychological tests and went into the fMRI device, but I felt very safe during the session, and also the feedback from other participants was very positive. I see that prohibition has deprived people of the possibility to regulate their mind with psychedelics in a culturally natural way. And this may be one reason for our unsustainable way of life and of the current mental health pandemic that doctors here are trying to treat. And people are deprived not only of the substances themselves, but also of the necessary skills of creating proper settings and navigating the psychedelic experience. This is a skill. And this is why these beneficial psychedelic experiences have to be given back to people in such a carefully curated medical form as we are trying to create here. So this psychedelic navigation skill has to be learned. You do not teach people to swim by throwing them into deep water. And this is why participant or patient preparation, as much as it is possible, is very important in trials and in therapy. And starting low dose, aiming for the minimal effective dose, and patient involvement in deciding about the dose is very important. Someone who barely holds their life together may not need such full ego dissolution, but just a change of perspective. Some people may need a full mystical experience to get the benefit, but for some people it may be too much and even dangerous, and it would be reasonable to test lower doses first. Thank you.
Thank you so much for highlighting those important considerations and the need that we have discussed previously also here already, and how best to address that. Thank you so much for that. And I know that Magda Rosenmüller is also waiting to come in.
Yes, thank you. I was actually following up on the great intervention by Christina Krysa and also Tadeusz on the potential funding possibilities. So IHI is a call that was just closed yesterday, I think, had a call on development of evidence-based practical guidance for real-world data to use in clinical trials. So I think we should keep an eye open on what are similar calls. I think something about real-world data or AI would definitely follow up. Here probably would be interesting to see from the industry who might be interested in that, because that needs the agenda for IHI is drafted mainly by industry needs. So here probably some joining before the call might be before a call or for the future would be good to identify areas. And then the other point that I also mentioned is the Future Horizon Europe. I'm sure there will be more on innovative way of addressing mental disorders. So that's definitely an area that we could keep an eye open to. But also the use of AI in clinical trials is also will probably also be on the agenda of Future Horizon Europe Code. So I think would be good, maybe Tadeusz, to take up your suggestion for actually looking into how can we make the best use of those funding, also now with the experience we have with CIPAL. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And that sounds very promising. I can see that Joost would like to come in, so please, over to you.
Yeah, thank you. I was hoping there were a few more interventions before mine. Because it's not a substantive comment, it's an invitation to an event that we're organizing on the 5th of June, which I really see as a continuation of this event, where we bring together regulators, industry members, patient perspectives, academics, clinicians, to discuss in a real interactive way on how to move forward. So it's just an open invitation for all of you to join. We're very happy to have the presence of Dr. Balabanov at this event and those of others here. So it's called the Pathways to Access Summit on the 5th of June in Haarlem, right here in the Netherlands.
Thank you so much for that. Now, at a certain point in time, we have exhausted, obviously, the questions, but please, I can see, please, over to you.
So I take the opportunity of summarizing a little bit in my head what I heard during this discussion, and to think about our future as researchers and clinicians, and the path forward also to get this psychedelic treatments approved the fastest as we can. So I think we should definitely think of a simple and not simpler way of designing psychological support that is enough and effective for administering these different psychedelic substances. And for that, and to keep our patients safe, I think we do it quicker also if we use the safety structure that our society already has, which are the professional boards that already exist, and supervise the clinicians, whatever clinicians we're talking about that will do this support, nurses, social workers, psychologists, psychiatrists. And in that way, we keep the conduct safe and maybe also effective to make these treatments available the fastest as we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those reflections. I can see, Gita, you would like to come in.
Yes, as we are nearing the end of this workshop, I want to also thank again for EMA for organizing this. I think it's very timely and important. And I have also noted down some action points that I want to bring forward as chair of the ECNP thematic working group on psychedelics. And one of them is certainly that I can support what was just said by Caroline, that common standards for preparation, sitter support, and integration is something I think we will continue to work with in this European context, and also learn from what has been done in the past. A second point is that I think we need to get our data put together, as also suggested today. There are a lot of initiatives in Europe. There are a lot of academics working on psychedelics, and there are very good data out there. To which extent we'll be able to get data and collaborate with industry, time will tell. At some point, eventually, I think they will be prepared and ready to share their data, and maybe we could even find some common grounds. But until then, at least data sharing among European sites would be quite valuable for us to leverage what is already what is already known. And then finally, my last take-home point here for us to look at in the ECNP initiative is adverse events. I think this is a very critical point that we need to look more into to get common standards for reporting in order to, of course, make sure that we have a good way of assessing adverse events, defining which adverse events are truly adverse events and which are expected side effects, if you will, of the therapy. But also to make sure to minimize the efforts for follow-up that we have, that we are not exaggerating based on the wrong assumptions here. So I think these were my 3 take-home messages for today. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, please.
Thank you. I would like to go back to Professor Roberts' comment of realizing at some point that the preparation for the ketamine treatments could be improved, and how much of an importance Joost's qualitative data had on this process. And similarly, for the expert in patient perspective, how can we integrate this? And if we are not perhaps inadvertently dismissing qualitative subjective data too much in this field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think by now we have exhausted. No, not yet. Please, over to you.
Yeah, very appropriate. Hi. Yeah, just a couple of points. Just wanted to respond to Amir's question about set and setting and whether there's been a study conducted into that. There's a Delphi study that's recently been conducted by Leo Roseman at Imperial College, the results of which I think should be available in the next couple of months. That's a multi-stakeholder study, Delphi study, and Saipan helped to source the participants that have taken part in that study. So yeah, that should give you some more insight and information into that, and yeah, a bit of hopefully evidence as to what's best, what works. Also, just wanted to reflect what Eric said about compassionate access. Yeah, there is a huge issue at the moment with people ending clinical trials and then they come out the other end, they can't legally access the treatment again. This can lead to people, they feel the effects fading after the clinical trial, they start grasping, feeling increasingly desperate as their old, thoughts or behavioural patterns return. Then they're faced with the choice of either breaking the law and hoping they can find somebody trustworthy enough on the underground, or they can pay to go to attend a ceremony or access therapy in a country where treatment is legal. But there's obviously, a huge cost barrier there for many people to be able to do that. And as we know, people struggling with many of these conditions, their capacity to earn is greatly reduced. The only other option really is to wait to access another clinical trial, which I've been very lucky. I've had 2 bites of the cherry, but many people won't get that opportunity. Or they can wait until the treatments become legal. And how long are we going to have to wait for that to happen? Hopefully everyone in this room can help make that happen. So really, they're left to suffer in the meantime. And I realise there's a question that I can't answer, but hopefully people in this room can, about how this is funded and who would fund it. Thank you.
Thank you. Very important points. And I can see an immediate reaction. Please, over to you.
Thank you. Just wanted to highlight the value of training and for training for future psychedelic therapists, and how desirable would be to have a European curriculum on psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy that being rolled out at the same time as regulatory changes come with these new medicines. So it would be something for everyone, I think, to think how can we coordinate or create a curriculum on teaching or learning how to implement these treatments, because these treatments, as has been said many times during these 2 days, are not the same as regular or conventional pharmaceuticals that were used to approved. And in this case, it will be very, very useful to have a specific training coming with these new developments in regulations in Europe. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Apologies. I thought it might have been an answer, but I think your question is so difficult that I don't know who should be funding it. The research, we had some very helpful comments from the Commission. So that's taken care of in a way, but you first have to achieve the funding to be able to get it. But the funding for patients and, well, insurance is, of course, one of those options, but that's probably not sufficient, and also not for compassionate use. But I don't know if there's anybody here who might provide an answer, but I'm afraid that it remains an important, very important, but very difficult to resolve question. So thank you for that anyway. So that's really important. I think we have now exhausted and we are nearing the end. So I hand back to Pavel to close this workshop in a way. So please, over to you.
Yes, first, with my hat on as the chair of the first session, we'll try to have some concluding remarks and not to keep anyone too long. I think that the main message that we heard in the first session was a very clear, aligned, even without previous discussions, message from all regulatory agencies on what the expectations are and how ready the system is to help and accommodate into the existing regulatory framework these potential new therapies. You've seen that all representatives of the regulatory sphere have expressed their readiness regardless of which region they represent. And there was also a mention from our side that the national authorities are also very active. So as a common message for anyone embarking on this journey in this very difficult, sometimes labyrinth of regulatory processes and interactions, just be aware that there is a lot of what you can use in any jurisdiction. And you've heard the regulatory agencies are here to support this if you need this. So the other aspects, of course, like funding for research, but also funding and HTA-associated cost-effectiveness considerations are not less important, and they have to be in the mind of the developers from the very early start, so you don't hit a bottleneck late with no data to address it. And I think this is a sufficiently clear message to say that there is a regulatory framework in each of the regions that exists that should be utilized for trying to have development in these psychedelic treatments and bringing them to the market. So be aware of it, contact the regulators early enough for a dialogue, and let's go together on this journey. That would be my summary for the first session. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Maybe Bruno, you're online. You would like to summarize your session?
Yes, I would. Thank you very much. And thank you, Pavel. For session 2, I think we wanted to highlight the methodological challenges faced when designing trials and to further understand how these challenges may be addressed. The majority of the currently identified methodological issues fall into 4 categories that Geeta Knudsen very well presented in her slides. And these are the issues regarding placebo, blinding and the expectations, the dosing and the maintenance of effect, safety and adverse events, but also the setting and the psychological support of psychotherapy. Due to what is currently known regarding the safety profile of psychedelics and considering the challenging study setup and execution, perhaps the first approach could be to consider clinical development in a more severely affected population of patients where a clear need is identified. And therefore, we had several references to the natural target population that appears to be patients with treatment-resistant depression. But this should not preclude pursuing other populations if deemed justified by the available evidence. So previous failed therapies to define treatment resistance should also be very well defined. And important are also further discussions on trial designs to establish short-term efficacy as well as trials to determine the maintenance of effect. One thing that popped up constantly in our discussions was the dose justification. Dose justification will be fundamental, and acknowledging that dose response studies with psychedelics are very difficult, effort should be done to properly document and discuss those effect relationships as part of any marketing authorization. Our discussions here today even prompt us to consider sub-psychedelic doses and the need to further investigate doses that are associated with psychoactive effects and neuroplasticity and not necessarily with psychedelic effects. Psychedelics include complex subjective experience. We had that statement here today also from our audience, but this needs to be acknowledged. And here it should also be mentioned that the relationship between characteristics of the acute psychedelic experience and clinical improvement should be addressed. Safety, including the negative experience known to be associated with psychedelic states, need also to be reported thoroughly. Appropriate risk evaluation and mitigation strategies supported by data are likely to be required to ensure safe adoption in real practice. And we have this also from several speakers here today. Several considerations will have also to be made regarding post-authorization studies that might have to be implemented to refine the benefit-risk balance. And also important, and to finalize, regulators have indeed a privileged holistic view of clinical development and will have a close contact with different clinical trials. It will be important to transform this knowledge gained into living guidelines to support further drug development and to continuously support the characterization of the benefit risk of using psychedelics in their proposed therapeutic indications. And let me assure you once again, as Pavel just mentioned, European regulators are prepared to take a proactive role and offer support for research and development via different scientific and regulatory platforms and tools that we already have available. And therefore, we encourage everyone, especially developers, to seek early dialogue, not only with us, with EMA, but also with other jurisdictions. We heard from FDA, USA, from Australia, from Health Canada, and Canada, of course, where it is important that we have, for the benefits of patients everywhere, we have agreed interactions with all stakeholders on these important developments. So we can only hope, and that's my hope from what we heard today, that the valuable information collected yesterday and today enhances our ability to address these challenges in a very near future. We are all interested parts on this. So back to you, Sabine and Pavel. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bruno. And then it's up to me to summarize and try to summarize the last session, which was called Real World Use, Ensuring Safe and Effective. And as always, I think the clinical trial surroundings and environment is quite clear, neatly organized, black and white. But as soon as you come to the real world, things become more blurry, a bit more messy, a bit more grayish. So I think we touched upon so many aspects, and everything or a lot has already been said, but I would like to highlight two important things that stuck with me. And first of all, I'm looking at the speaker to my left side. I think and we have seen how important the patient participation is in this workshop, but also in clinical trials. I think it's really important to involve them as soon as possible. The public and patient involvement is crucial. I also think it might also be crucial for the funding. And that was another thing that popped up, the funding of the clinical trials, but also the funding of compassionate use, the funding of patients who need an additional treatment course, etc. So I think those two issues, patient participation and money, are very, very important to make this psychedelic substances available. I think we all agreed all over the sessions on the important medical need. So it's up to us to make it happen. I'm going to quote from one of the speakers, the way to predict the future is to create it. We now have the momentum, and I would really like to urge everybody to keep that momentum and try to come up with helpful, cooperative data sharing aspects, because I think there is a lot out there and the quality might be a bit different. It might not be all the level of a clinical trial, but real world data and real world evidence is gaining momentum too. So I think we should make optimal use of that data that's available already there in order to address this important medical need that's obviously out there. And there is so much knowledge here. I'm really impressed by everybody, and I would like to thank everybody for this great, fantastic presentations. And with that, I would like to hand over to our chair of the day and the days. So Pavel, over to you for the last words.
Thank you, Dr. Strauss. Well, for me now is the honor and the pleasure indeed to close this event. And I'd like to summarize it by saying thank to all of you, not only the speakers, the panelists, and the people who engaged here in the room, but also the people online. We did, I hope you agree, succeed in our goal to make this an interactive dialogue event. And for that, all of you were really, really important. We've heard different views. We've heard everyone who wanted to speak, but most importantly, we established future avenues that I'm sure will be followed in collaboration. So thank you for making this workshop a success, and thank you for being here, not only in mind and in body, but thinking about the future. Now, I'd like to express specific thanks for the sponsors of this workshop, our executive management. And although our executive director, Emer Cook, and our chief medical officer, Stefan Tirstep, were not able to physically join, I know and I'm certain that they fully and wholeheartedly supported not only this workshop, but the whole initiative, recognizing the importance of the issue and placing it as one of our priorities so we can act. So thank to them. And I want to be absolutely certain to recognize also everyone that was so key in making this workshop flow fluidly and seamlessly. So allow me, if I just mention a few names that I do not want to be left unnoticed. On the other side of the panelists and the speakers, people that you will not see in the background, there are a couple of experts from my own office, Dr. Florence Butlen and Francisca, who have contributed to the content and to the invitation. So Francisca Silva, who you may have seen only in your emails, but they are key to making this work. And I cannot state more the importance of the practical organization of this event being dealt with in such a perfect way by our stakeholders department. And I want to mention the names of Kate Brown, of Ivana Silva, of Žena Šterova, and Marina Dobreva, the ladies who are working there throughout the days. Allow me to thank them publicly in front of everyone. Great job, everyone, and thank you very much for providing their service. One or two final comments on a practical nature. It's really important for us to hear your feedback. So don't forget to fill in the survey so we can use this as an example or maybe as a way to evaluate whether such events of such nature are indeed useful and can be a tool for us to interact with stakeholders. Do not forget to return your badges and please have the best and safest trip home. It was really a pleasure meeting all of you. Thank you very much.